Controversy was already brewing last night in Oklahoma when the state's House of Representatives approved a ballot measure which, if approved by voters next year, would eliminate affirmative action across the entire state government. And then Republican State Representative Sally Kern decided to pour gasoline on the fire. You may remember Kern's warning 3 years ago, quote, "The homosexual agenda was a bigger threat to America than terrorism." This time, during the affirmative action debate, Kern decided that women and African Americans aren't making less money because of discrimination. Kern concluded they simply aren't working as hard as white men.
We have heard tonight already that in prison there's more black people. Yes, there are, and that's tragic. It's tragic that our prisons here in Oklahoma, what are they, 99% occupancy? But the other side of the story, perhaps we need to consider, is this just because they're black that they're in prison? Or could it be because they didn't want to work hard in school? And white people oftentimes don't want to work hard in school, or Asians oftentimes. But a lot of times, that's what happens. I taught school for 20 years, and I saw a lot of people of color who didn't want to work as hard. They wanted it given to them. Matter of fact, I had one student that said, "I don't need to study. You know why? The government's going to take care of me." That's kind of revealing there. You see, women usually don't want to work as hard as a man because, now wait a minute, now listen to me. Women, hang on, women tend to think a little bit more about their family, wanting to be at home more time, wanting to have a little more leisure time. That's all I mean.
Joining me now, MSNBC contributor Melissa Harris-Perry, Associate Professor of Politics and African American Studies at Princeton University. Melissa, first of all, I think it's clear that Kern should stay on the teleprompter. But I want to start because she apologized today, and so I want to just read that quickly. It says, "I want to humbly apologize for my statements last night about African Americans and women. I believe that our government should not provide preferences based on race or gender. I misspoke while trying to convey this point last night during debate. Women are some of the hardest workers in the world. My husband is a pastor of a diverse inner-city church, and the way that my words came out last night is certainly not my true spirit." So, Melissa, this is kind of our standard, Kubler-Ross Stations of the Cross arc of these things. You say something horribly offensive and racist and then apologize. And I never know quite how I'm supposed to feel at the end of it. So I want to tell you to tell me how I should feel about this apology.
Oh, my goodness. I mean, I can imagine that you need me to tell you how to feel because you must be so exhausted from working so hard all day. And I've clearly been napping as a black woman. But, look, I appreciate that it is both painful, irritating, surprising in 2011 to hear an elected official say, those kinds of statements, in a state house, in the legislature. But let's stay focused. The racism that we should care about here, the racial inequality, the racial anxiety we should have is about that bill, not about that legislator. So, certainly her words help to give us some evidence about what are the impulses, what's the nature behind that bill. But the real issue is that there is an attempt here to remove a policy that is critically needed by people of color to have a level playing field on which to do business, go to school, and have opportunities for contracts.
I want to talk about the substance of the bill, and I want to give what seems like it could be the best possible argument in favor of this sort of thing, which is the sort of Clarence Thomas, Ward Connolly line of argumentation. And there's the Republican sponsor in the state who's African American and American Indian heritage, who basically says that affirmative action creates this sort of stigma, this double standard that's fundamentally unfair to people of color. Now, what do you think of that argument? How should we think about that argument?
Well, it's an odd one. I mean, the idea that the stigma of blackness comes from affirmative action and not from slavery, Jim Crow, histories of segregated housing. I mean, it's odd, but let's also just look, very closely here at the facts. My colleague at Princeton, Diva Pager, a sociologist, has brilliant research in her book, Marked. And the research shows very clearly that an African-American man with no prison record, none, is less likely to get a job interview than a white man with a prison record.
And identical resumes, I should say, in that study.
Right. That's right. Identical resumes. The only thing being different is the identifiability of the race of the candidate and whether or not they have a prison record. Now, that tells me that racism is alive and well in its most old-fashioned forms. Now, then take that out of the equation, and let's just look at how it structurally reproduces itself. The fact that, for example, we have legacy admissions to universities that were once all-white universities. So even if you're not actively sort of working against black interests there, the simple fact that there are legacy admissions in a place where everybody who would be legacy would most likely also be white tells us that there are all of these structural elements as well as these active ones. So we have to have policy that intervenes in it. And the notion that the stigma comes from the intervening justice-based fairness policy is, I think, really troubling.
Finally, Melissa, I wonder why you think that affirmative action seems to be kind of creeping back into the center of national debate. We're seeing it now with the conversation about Barack Obama, why he got into Harvard Law, and we're seeing in this Oklahoma bill. What do you chalk that up to? Because it did seem like it had sort of moved out of the center of American political discourse for a while.
Well, remember that right after President Obama was elected, much of the discourse on the right and left was this language that now black folks will achieve more because they can, if they can see it, they can achieve it. And so it's as though we can now get rid of the structures because with President Obama in, all we have to do is imagine that we too could be president and all of the bad stuff and all the history will fall away.
Melissa Harris Perry of The Nation magazine, My Nation, and MSNBC, Princeton University, thank you so much.
Thanks, Chris.